All right, we live.
We live, yeah.
Welcome to Fresh. I am Durrell Norris, CEO of Fresh Tech Solutions, and I have a couple of my business partners with me.
I'm Nicholas Mbezwe Daniel, CEO of Aegis Project Management, LLC.
And I am Dr. Doug Franklin, CEO and co-founder of Deck Launch LLC. How y'all doing today?
We are doing pretty good on this lovely Monday. Nick, what about yourself?
I'm all right, man. It's good to see y'all.
Cool. So today's Fresh Tech tip topic is to risk or not to risk. We're going to be deep diving into risk management. Nick, go ahead and hit us with one of those beautiful definitions.
Yeah. So everybody knows about risk, I guess, in some point or in some way or the other. But the definition of risk is an exposure to danger, harm, loss, or failure. So that goes into whatever you're doing, whatever your exposure is to that plan or that activity failing or being harmed or losing. That's pretty much what risk is.
Yeah. So I want to go over, a couple of things. I want to talk about first risk appetite. I want to talk about risk management, the keys to it, and then risk mitigation. So Nick, let's go ahead and get right into this thing and talk about this risk appetite.
I think this one was especially for you because I know we've had some conversations before of how risk tolerant of a person you are. Whatever the extreme range is, or behind the scale, that's where you are. You're just a really, 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 really optimistic person, always going for the home run and just staying with that. So I definitely had you in mind with this topic. And pretty much what we're talking about is risk appetite means how much risk is somebody willing to take on everything. And so they have people who are risk averse, which means someone who's a lot more cautious, will really not really want to take any risk. That means low risk appetite, versus somebody who is risk tolerant, who can tolerate a lot of risk and just not flinch. So we're trying to figure out where you stand on each of them. That will let you know how much planning you need to do, or what kind of decisions you need to make. And also it's good for you to know if you're making decisions because of things the way they are, or if you're just making decisions because you're afraid or not. And so before I toss it to you, Warren Buffett said that risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. That'll give you a little bit of a clue to what I am. But Darrell, what about you? What are you? All right, tell them what you are.
So yeah, we all said this is going to be a fun episode. Everybody pretty much knows how I am. I am very. I like to take risks. I like to take the lead, which is why I probably make Nick's job probably hard, being that he's supposed to be the risk management person of the team. So it's always interesting, but I appreciate that he knows me, and him and Doug, they know me and they know how much of a risk taker I am just by nature. And so it's really good to have them on the team now to tell me, hey, real, that's stupid. let's not do that. So yeah, it's a risk management is something that I clearly need help with. And this is why I have you on the team, Nick. Doug, let's hear your perspective about all that and how you manage my risks.
Rel, you hit it right on the head. So a lot of the way that we manage risk is basically through balance. So I tend to be a little bit more moderate. I'm always looking for what's the opportunity cost when we make decisions. And so I always think about, okay, so what value does this bring with regards to time or money? And then if we don't take this opportunity, what does that mean? And we talk about all the time, because I mean, when you're talking about a small business, you know, what are you always looking for? You're looking for revenue, you're looking for opportunity, you're looking for chances to save time. And so when it comes to us saving time, I'm super risk averse, and I make it pretty clear about that. But when it comes to some of the financial opportunities, I tend to be a little bit more willing to take some more risk. So we're somewhere. But I think Rel kind of put it out there on a great spectrum. I guess I'm smack dab in the middle between him and Nicholas. So it makes it really easy for us to work together, because we all have that really good. We have a good balance of mix. Like it's a great portfolio of risk, if you will.
For sure.
So how do you know when to avoid taking that risk, and versus wanting to take that risk? Like Nick, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so like Doug just mentioned, man, and he talked about opportunity cost. I mean, you can tell he has a doctorate somewhere in that house, but that's one of the things that you consider. So, and the way you know about risk is before I put the big terms on there, you want to know what it is, what can he do to me either way, and then what can I do about it. That's pretty much what we're going to get into. So the first thing we're talking about, what it is there, is quantification. That's knowing how much the risk. First, identifying the risk identification, like what are the things that could affect me, and it changes. We were talking about an example, like let's keep something simple, like I'm crossing the street. What is the risk when I'm crossing the street? If you were to do a crazy analysis on it, which you do as a regular person, is okay, I don't want to get hit by a car. That's your main risk. So how do you respond to that? Well, I look both ways, or whatever you've been taught, and you cross the road. If there was like a puddle on the end of the road, or if somebody was chasing you and you were crossing the road, or it was a highway, your risk starts to change based on what you're doing. So what you do is identify the risk, and that changes based on what kind of business you're in, whether it's a project, whether it's an easy decision, family. You identify, okay, what are things that can impact me, and then how can it impact me? Once you know those two things, then you can move forward into the next thing.
Yeah, and the first thing that I think about is, just kind of business 101-ish, where you do a SWOT analysis. And so you look at your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And just doing that exercise of understanding, okay, what am I good at? What am I not good at? What's out there? And then what could hurt me in the business, gives you a pretty good opportunity to look at risk. And then when you think about risk, there are things that are risky that fit between your strengths and weaknesses. So there's certain things that are going to be a risk that you should be able to mitigate, or to not worry quite as much about, because you're strong in certain things. But on the other hand, there's some things that are going to be extremely risky, because maybe you don't have the resources or the capabilities to be able to overcome some of those things. So that's one of the first things systems that I always think about when working with my clients, or even when working with our businesses, when we go ahead and take risks.
Yeah, and just being one thing that's helped us a lot, will help me a lot, because I'm the risk taker out of the group, is just being knowledgeable and being intentional about that risk, and understanding that there is risk with everything you do, with every decision you make. You have to think about those consequences. I mean, it might sound kind of childish, but it really is. You have consequences for your action. That's what it comes down to. So I've had some huge decisions to make as a business owner, and it's helped me to be able to actually say, okay, what is the real risk of this? If I do this, this is going to happen. So that's helped me a lot, just being grounded with you guys, because as y'all know, I have lots of ideas and they're flowing all the time, and that's and we can transition to that into risk prioritization. So Nick, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so once you do know what the risks are, like Darrell was saying, where you're making a business decision or whatever it is that you're doing, once you identify what the risks are and you also identify the impact, then you want to know, okay, how likely is each of these things to happen? So and the main reason why you're doing this is that your resources are always limited. You can't address everything. It's just like things that we talked about in the past. What keeps people planning forever? Because they want it to be perfect, and that's impossible. So there's some risks that you might not even know of. So once you know all the risks that you see, then you want to rank them under some kind of scale. Of some people use risk scores, and I have written down here some formulas that people use in different. I'm sure Doug can give us math formulas, but probability of the event happening multiplied by the amount of loss or the impact is going to give you some kind of score or some kind of rating that you can use to categorize your risk. Or some people, you can just keep it simple and just say, what's high, what's the highest risk, what's medium, what's less. That way you can focus your attention on the key things that need to be focused on. Or you can decide altogether if you don't need to take this course. If the risk level is just way too high, then, okay, I need to step back. I need to do this and this and this. And then another good thing about that, you can eliminate some of the risk pretty simply. Once you identify them, you see like, oh, well, I mean, that's a small risk. I can just take that out by planning and changing my process in this way, or making my decision at this time, or whatever it is, or bringing this person on. So that way you can eliminate as much as you can eliminate before you go into it. And we'll kind of go into risk mitigation, but you have to rank your risk from high level priority to low level priority, because you can't address everything. You want to address the right things as soon as you can.
Yeah, a lot of times when I think about risk prioritization, I think I started to hit it. It's always time, money, and team. So how does this? So taking on this project or prioritizing between two projects to take, how does it affect how I work, what I can work on, and how quickly can I work on it? And then, of course, how does this financially affect the squad and affect the business? And then on top of that, just team. When you're talking about, we can pick up a project, but basically, if I don't understand how that affects the rest of the team, then there's a possibility I could end up working on a project by myself, which would be crazy, or picking a project that doesn't really fit our skill set, which could be even crazier, or even picking a client that does not necessarily fit with the dynamics of our team, which in turn, something like that actually affects the other two elements of risk for me in my head. And so that's the thing. So when you look at anything with regards to your business, a lot of the things that you consider for risk are actually push and pulls based on what's going on, because time affects money and affects your staff and your team. All of it's intertwined.
Yeah, no, Doug, I love that example for the deck launch client. That's the example I kind of want to get back on. So you said, we have these clients that come with us every day with these ideas. So we have a decision to make. Sometimes we get an idea that, let's say I don't believe in the idea. Then we have a decision to make. There's lots of risk involved in taking this client on. First of all, we're not helping the client. I don't think. I don't want to. I never want to just take people's money, especially if we don't believe in the idea. So one thing, one thing we can do about that, one way to mitigate that risk is to go and have a brainstorming session. How can we make this idea better? That's one side of things. Other side of things, risk of taking it. There's positive sides too. You get that money. There's another thing. We're trying to keep our ratio up. We want to be able to say, this many % of our clients get funded. And if we don't believe in an idea and we don't think it's going to get funded, it's not going to get funded because you have to have all parties all in. And, so it's the risk we take every day. Just a simple decision like taking on a client, it could be crucial. So risk management is something that like I said before, I never really thought about as much as I do now, and I thank Nick for that.
Bro, you said some. I mean, you always say great things, but you said some key things right there, because risk, either you're gonna control it or it's gonna control you. And those simple decisions that you make, there's something called risk interaction. You don't know how these risks are either interacting with each other, or like Doug said, it's interacting with your team, interacting with your money, and how the domino effect, the ripple effect that comes from each decision that you make. So those seemingly the simple decisions, if you don't take into account what the risks are going to have effects that you couldn't bargain for, and that could be extremely detrimental.
Yeah. And since we really like to give some living examples, our third deck launch client ever was trying to get into an industry with a service based app where the barrier to entry in the Houston area was way different than any other state or any other city, even in Texas. And initially we told them, hey, it will be viable anywhere else but Houston. Can we identify another target market and find a partner there? And they disagreed, which is okay, because your clients don't necessarily have to take all of your strategic recommendations. But where we had to realize that that the project was too risky for us and for them was by first showing them how much money it would get them to have to crack into the industry they were interested in here in Houston. It was going to cost them somewhere around $250,000 just to be able to introduce their project to the community, particularly where there were other organizations that were the exact same place. So there's a lot of risks there when you're talking about it. You're talking about a company that wanted to go hit with the big boys in a market that was going to cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars they didn't necessarily have, which also negatively affected the team that they hired. So now here we are. We're talking about a lot of these things: the time, the money, the team, the resources, all these things that are so risky. And ultimately we had to tell the client we could no longer work for them because this project was too risky for us. It was very interesting because I don't know how far they've gotten since then, because they were still willing to take the risk. So I really hope they found that $250,000 to keep the dream going.
So let's move on to our next subject. I wanted to hit on this business continuity plan, Nick.
Yeah. So business continuity plan is really one of the examples of risk mitigation. So with risk mitigation, what you're trying to do is either eliminate or reduce the probability, the two concepts that we talked about with risk, meaning how likely is this going to happen, or the effect that comes from it, the impact. So ways that you can do that is obviously through planning. And the reason why I did we want to talk about business continuity plan is because most of us, we always come at things from the angle of businesses and entrepreneurship. So anything that can stop your business from running, obviously that's what we want to tackle first. So once you identify this process that we've talked about, identifying your risk, quantifying the risk, prioritizing them, and then you want to answer to them, you want to do a response that will help you, either reduce the probability of the risk happening or the impact that's going to happen. So that document that you should create, or that plan where those contingencies are, is called your business continuity plan. It's a document that should be backed up with resources that is going to take to execute those plans, training, updating them. Can't just do it once and keep it somewhere. To gather dust. It has to be something that you really, really, really bring along with you and you care about. Now let's put some things into perspective to think about the crisis that's going on right now. Yes, there's no way you could have said that something like this, a worldwide pandemic, will happen. I don't think that was in a lot of people's business continuity plans unless you're in healthcare or, even them, But some people did
Hey,
prepare for
Nick, it's gonna be in mine now.
That's what I'm saying. That's when I come and tell you about it, and it's not going to look like, oh, you're just doing some kind of zombie scenario that's never going to happen. But for some people did prepare for, hey, what if for some reason, and this is a category people like to say act of God. What if for some reason something huge stops you from doing this, this, or this? What do? You can prepare for if people can't come into your store. It doesn't matter what the reason is. You can prepare for that. You can prepare for my network going down. You can prepare for being hacked. You can prepare for all these things. And if you do the planning once and you update it and keep the resources, when it happens, that could be the difference between you losing, I don't know how much, people who are losing money or losing time, losing staff, versus being able to come back or making 50% of your revenue and then planning for that, at least knowing that you can get that. And the main reason why you should do this is because a lot of businesses do not come back from missteps. Like it's hard enough as it is. So that's why you do that, so that you don't go into negative or 100% loss. So you do have some kind of fighting chance to come back. And so that's why this is really important.
Yeah, this is like, I really appreciate business continuity plans, because the first thing I think of was my first job out of undergrad, where I was working with one of the largest oil and gas companies in the world, and they used to have us walking around with something that said, "What's the worst that could happen?" all the time, and so, when you think about it as an invincible 20-something, you're like, well, the worst that could happen is I could die or something like that. And now, as I've continued to work, almost 20 years later and stuff, what's the worst that could happen is really real in all kinds of facets. You should always think about those things. And I go back to some of the clients that we've started to see that were like, yeah, I really need to get back on my online marketing. I'm clients as well. I should have an app. My website should be updated. None of these people were thinking, what's the worst that could happen if someone can't walk into my store today? And what's the worst that could happen could be that my store is closed today, tomorrow, a week, a year. And those are things we don't necessarily take into consideration. But I think the greatest thing about the business continuity plan is that this thing is fluid and you can change it. And that's something that we always try to stress, is like, always have living documents that allow you to change, because the most important thing about being able to mitigate risk is also being fluid with what's going on in your environment.
No, Doug, I love that. So one thing, I have a great example about that. And like we was talking about, joking earlier, we're going to have coronavirus on my plan now. But no, it all comes with experience. I have a perfect example. When I first started my business, when I first started Fresh Tech, I was about a year in, and we had this software that helps us create our apps without doing them completely from scratch. That's how we're able to get our cost so low. So Apple came in and said, "Hey, if you're not making apps from scratch, we're not approving no apps." So I'm like, "Wait, that's my whole entire business. What am I gonna do? Like, what happens if Apple says you can't make apps no more?" So in a sense, my business is dependent upon Apple and Google, and that has to be in that plan. What happens if Apple says I have to start building apps from scratch? Then I have to start charging everybody those normal development prices because they don't match up. So it's for the thing we did to get past that kind of is we introduced progressive web apps. So those are those apps that you don't need to be approved by Apple and Android. the app that we created for the coronavirus is a progressive web app. All you have to do is go to coronavirus.freshtechsolutions.com and it'll come up. If it's on your phone, it'll look just like a phone app. So risk mitigation, risk mitigation and risk management was very crucial in that time. And it was very scary because I really thought my business was finna crash and burn.
And in a lot of ways, bro, in a lot of ways, these risk lessons, like those ones, have come through time. They come from failures. So if you go up and you look up a business, your business, you try and see what the risks are, and you type it in on Google and look it up, you see stories and whatever, and you just think, okay, this is information. But nah, that's not information. That's lots of people who have made horrible mistakes and is now documented for you to learn from. So
which brings me back,
people have made.
Which brings me back to the importance of mentors. So, you have that mentor, that's risk management. They've already been there, done that.
It really is.
So we had a question that popped up on Facebook from John Turner of Philly. Hey John, John is a Temple MBA, real cool brother. He asks, do you approach all decisions by first evaluating opportunity costs or only revenue generating activities? I guess I'll take that first. I always am all about opportunity cost altogether. We actually, I think Nick and I went thoroughly deep. We had a deep dive into one of the opportunities that presented itself last week, and actually all of us were on the call. We were talking about an opportunity with a couple of the projects that we were considering taking right now, and man, when you're talking about a project, particularly when you're a small business in the during a pandemic, every single dollar sounds great. it looks so good that we almost found ourselves really trying to jump into a couple of things that would have just made us miserable in the long term. And so it got back into time. It got back into how is it going to affect the team, and ultimately, I think even in the conversation, I got even a little bit selfish for myself, and I was like, well, what about my mental health? Because I don't want to necessarily deal with some of these projects that we could be possibly working on, and so it's about the cost across different levels. So so even though money sounds really good, I take a full opportunity cost perspective, and I also look at I look at value in economic terms. So utility. So utility is like, am I happy? Can I take naps? Can I take a nap, or am I stressing all during the day? Are my boys happy? Because these guys being happy is paramount to me. And then on top of that, are we making a little bit of money on top? So we get all those things, and that's like basically the sweet spot. And so money's good. Money's great, particularly right now. But I take a full view.
No, definitely, man. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks for that question. It was an awesome question. Next week, please join us. We'll be here on every Monday until we get our punishment. We'll be here at 12 o'clock. So come back and join us on our Facebook Live. This is Fresh Tech Tips. Just kind of recap of today's episode. We're talking about risk management, to risk but not to risk. We went through the risk appetite, the management keys, the keys to risk quantification, risk prioritization, and just risk mitigation. So if you next time you have an important decision, just please think about that risk. Please do that risk analysis, and just if you ask me, I'm gonna say take the risk because everybody knows. I like to
take the risk, you know it.
Thanks y'all for joining Fresh Tech. Thanks for joining Fresh Tech Tips. I am Darrell Noyer signing off, and we'll see y'all next Monday.